Near mint condition, the home of collected editions.
That cover's so awesome.
Absolute format is the best way to own this store. Time to empty those wallets and fill those shelves. How's it going, all you minties? Uncanny Omar here from Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions, and join me today for my overview of The Dark Knight from DC Comics. This is the latest printing, so let's go ahead and get started. And welcome back, everybody. What we're looking at here is the latest printing of The Absolute Dark Knight from DC Comics. This is the 2024 printing. It's been printed previously before. There was a 2020 printing, and there was one that goes back all the way to 2000. I believe it was 2004 or 5, if I'm not mistaken. It's an older printing, but this is the third printing, and we are going to be comparing it to the second printing, this one here. And I got rid of my first printing. I gave it away, actually, when I ended up getting this. So I'm just going to be comparing it to this. And yes, this slipcase right here is a little bit darker than the new printing. Let's look at the side. By the way, the new printing also comes wrapped in plastic. And it comes in his own little cardboard box with a little leaflet, which I love. This tells you just a little bit about what's collected in here. And of course, the ISBN with the retail price being $125. This second printing was I think it was just $99.95. The back of the books right here. Yeah, the contrast here between the black and the white is a little bit better than over here. And that's what happens when you move. Ouch. And then the back of the slipcase. And we'll take them out of the slipcase here in a second. Absolute Dark Knight, Miller, Jansen, Varley, and Absolute Dark Knight. This does seem to pop out a little better than this version right here. The slipcase, that is. Now let's take it. Then the backs of the books here featuring Carrie. And just a little bit lighter over here. Now we're going to look underneath the dust jacket. The design of the dust jacket and the design of the book is done by Chip Kidd. That's what the flaps look like. But honestly, that's the way they looked in the second printing as well. Just black. So, looking practically the same here. Then, of course, the cape that expands all the way to the back here. So, what the image really looks like is this image right here from book number 1, The Dark Knight Returns. So, I can't believe I've never done an overview of this. I think it must have been one of my haul videos that I just talked about it. So here is the overview for the first time. Before going any further, I do want to thank Organic Price Books for sending us a copy of this Absolute Edition. So I'm going to open this up. We're going to look at the artwork. We're going to talk about The Dark Knight Returns. And then we'll talk about The Dark Knight Strikes Back. There's 2 series collected in here. And there is a third series, the Dark Knight Master Race, so it's the Dark Knight 3. That's also going to be reprinted later this year, and I'll do a comparison to my original printing of that. I will let you know when I'm about to talk about each series, and then, of course, minor spoilers just in case. But I'll let you know when all that takes place. All right, let's go ahead and crack this Absolute open. I love the end sheet right there of Batman and Robin, and the end sheets in the back are also a little bit different. Good soldier, good soldier. Oh, love that. That's from the original story that is collected in here. But first, let's look at the design. These blown up panels just add such a nice touch to the book. Frank Miller, Klaus Janson, Lynn Varley, and then letter by John Costanza and Todd Klein. Batman created by Bill Finger and Bob Kane. Superman created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster by special arrangement with the Jerry Siegel family. And that was your title page. You do have a forward here, an introduction by Frank Miller, talking about the idea of the Dark Knight and where it came from. And then, interesting enough, starting with the Seduction of the Innocent book that was coming out in the 50s that led to the Comics Code, and then explaining a little bit about where he was in his life when he wrote The Dark Knight Strikes Again. And I'll explain a little bit about that when I talk about The Dark Knight Strikes Again without going into spoilers. We have these newspaper clippings back here. and then the beginning of book number 1. So collected in here is Batman The Dark Knight Returns 1 through 4 and Batman The Dark Knight Strikes Again 1 through 4. The book has 512 pages and retails for $125. Now, before going any further, minor spoilers as to the pitch of The Dark Knight. So, interesting enough, the books themselves weren't called Batman The Dark Knight Returns, issue 1, 2, 3, and 4, but what they were really called is just Batman The Dark Knight. So, issue 1 was known as The Dark Knight Returns, issue 2 was The Dark Knight Triumphant, issue 3 was The Dark Knight, or no, Hunt for the Dark Knight, and then issue 4 was The Dark Knight Falls. And that's how these were introduced to us when they were coming out in 1986. But when it was collected, they went with the name The Dark Knight Returns, which is the name of the first book. All right, so what's going on? What is this about? This takes place in a possible future, dystopian future, where Batman Bruce Wayne is 55 years old and he has been retired from being Batman for 10 years. He's driving this for Ferris 6000 right here, and it's burning out, and then you start seeing some talking heads through here that are actual news correspondents talking about just Bruce Wayne and also life in this particular world, in this particular future. So, in a way, a lot of us, when we talk about this book, whenever we review The Dark Knight Returns, we mention them and compare them to the Greek chorus that would tell a story. And that's what you get here. It's like you get tidbits of what's happening in Bruce Wayne's life and how nobody has seen Batman for 10 years, and then what's going on as far as society. We learn about the mutants as a group of villains that are going around mugging people, doing horrible things to people, and just because they can. So we see Bruce Wayne, an old Bruce Wayne, and meeting up with Commissioner Gordon, who's about to turn 70 years old and wants to retire from being a commissioner. So at this point, they know, or at least Commissioner Gordon knows, that Bruce Wayne is Batman, or was Batman. Hasn't been Batman for 10 years. On his way home, he's mugged by these two groups of mutants. And when writing this story, the idea for this was that Frank Miller was actually mugged, and it inspired him to tell a story about Batman in the future, where he's not Batman anymore, where his body has just kind of turned on him. And there's also an inspiration for The Dark Knight Strikes Again. So again, we have some talking heads explaining about the character of Harvey Dent, how he's had reconstructive surgery under his doctor, what is his name, Bartholomew Walper, who has been treating him and has put him back into society. However, Harvey Dent has decided to disappear. So Bruce Wayne is having flashbacks. There's a nice little conversation here about Dick Grayson, where's Dick? And Bruce is like, I haven't seen him in 7 years. And you learn that he's also lost Jason Todd. Now, in DC continuity, this takes place before, or I'm sorry, in publishing order, this takes place before Batman Year 1 came out. This takes place before A Death in the Family and Lonely Place of Dying. So as far as DC continuity at the time, Jason Todd was still Robin and still alive. And in here, you learn that something horrible happened to him. So he has flashbacks about becoming Batman and going back and forth as to whether to don the Batsuit or not. Alfred is still alive. I love this. Alfred is in like his 80s and he's still taking care of Batman. He's still his trusted butler, his medic, and confidant. And now he's in his 80s and he's telling this man who's 55 years old, maybe it's not a good idea. But after seeing just horrible things, crime after crime, and the rise of crime coming to Gotham City, he stands up and decides one night that he is going to become Batman again. It's been 10 years, but he has to stand up for this city. A lot of imagery here that takes you back to those classic origin stories, particularly Batman Year One, which of course he wrote with David Mazzucchelli on artwork later on. Now we start seeing the group of mutants, because one of the things that Frank Miller did so well was build all these subplots. We were introduced to Carrie Kelly here and her friend, and they're attacked by a group of mutants and are saved by Batman, and that kind of inspires her to just take charge and be her own person. And then we see Batman again in his own costume, and it's the flashy costume. It's like the Silver Age costume with the black on yellow. He's a little thicker, right, because this guy's 55. I love the dialogue through here. There's some really good stuff as he's sitting there in the rain and the rain hits his symbol. He's talking about like the baptism. And then another subplot that we have is the Joker, who's been in a comatose state for years. But at the site, for some reason, they're playing this news, this breaking news about Batman coming back right in front of the Joker. This guy starts smiling again, and he just keeps saying Batman. Of course, that leads to Batman. So you kind of get the Joker back. And again, talking heads in the way of that Greek chorus, just throwing you in the middle of this dystopian future, kind of speaking about Batman and the insights of the failings of society. And you get to learn all about this world through them. And of course, this is all in the first issue. And you get to see who's behind the mutants, and Batman taking on just these thugs and eventually stopping Harvey Dent from blowing up the city of Gotham because he's come back. Because even reconstructive surgery, which is explained here how, doesn't keep the monster at bay. Oh, it's wonderful. I love this story. Let's move on to issue number 2. We'll just barely talk about each of these issues. Now we have Carrie Kelly coming in and putting on this costume. It's a generic costume that she bought at just like a costume shop because she is inspired by Batman. And then Batman just goes all out on the mutants in this. Fights the mutant leader, and it is this brutal fight. And there is some amazing imagery through here. And I forgot that they turned this into an animated movie. I think it was a 2-parter. I don't know. Honestly, I never got around to finishing it. By the end of the fight, and like I said, it's a brutal, amazing fight. By the end of the fight, we no longer have the mutants. Like, Batman, of course, comes out triumphant. The mutant leader, well, you can find out how the fight ends. But now we have some people that are turning to Batman's ways, and they're calling themselves the SOBs, the Sons of Batman. Issue number 3 shows how Superman is working for the U.S. government. And he's still, talking to Clark about this. We still see some of the DC heroes in this first story arc, the Dark Knight Returns. Just a little bit older and what's happened to them. I love the way the Joker is drawn. Oh, this is so good. Klaus Jansson's inks are just so beautiful. And the freaking watercolors that Lynn Varley just uses in each panel, each splash page, are just amazing. And really make this dark, gritty city come to life. Like, particularly, whenever you're in the first issue, that all those different tones, you kind of feel like Gotham is another character to this book. And it's something special about that they actually bring into the Batman Year One. And then, of course, we have to talk about the 4th and final issue in here, which is the fight against Superman. Because a lot of this is taken, and whether it's put into an animated movie or whether it's put into the Batman versus Superman movie, it inspired a lot of people. Now, at this point, Commissioner Gordon has retired, and the new commissioner, Ellen Yindel, does not like vigilantes. So she set out a war, not just with her police force, but the military against Batman. And of course, the U.S. government sends in Superman to take care of Batman. So you get this big, God, I love that picture. You get this big, iconic fight in the 4th issue between Batman and Superman. And one of the most badass Batman lines in the history of Batman is spoken. And I can't say what it is because it would give away the outcome of the fight. But it is so badass that if you have not read it, do yourself a favor and read it. All right. Now, I do want to talk about The Dark Knight Strikes Back. But if you haven't read The Dark Knight, I strongly suggest reading that before even watching this video, because I don't want to spoil what happens in The Dark Knight Strikes Back or at the end of this book. So just in case, minor spoilers for the setup of The Dark Knight Strikes Back. And then we'll do a comparison and, of course, look at the back of the book. All right. Keep calling it The Dark Knight Strikes Back. It's Batman The Dark Knight Strikes Again. And I will be dead honest with you. I've only read this story twice. Whereas The Dark Knight Returns, the original one, I've read, oh my gosh, 15 times probably. I I know that when I first got that trade paperback, I read it 3 times that year. Okay, so in 2001, Frank Miller came back to DC and gave us a continuation of his Dark Knight story. Now, if you're keeping up with continuity in DC, a lot of this stuff can be taken out of continuity. It can be its own little Miller universe, if you will. There's Dark Knight Returns, there's the Dark Knight Strikes Again, there's the Dark Knight Master Race. All Star Batman and Robin is actually the prequel to all of this. So there is that. So that's kind of its own canon universe. And Batman and Spawn with Miller is also the Batman from this particular world. All right, so what is going on here? Well, 3 years they've passed since the ending of the Dark Knight. So with the fall of the Dark Knight, that last storyline, issue number 4, or the Dark Knight Falls, at the beginning of this, Bruce Wayne is alive. So Bruce Wayne is alive, and now Carrie Kelly is no longer going as Robin. Carrie Kelly is now Catgirl. It's never really explained why she became Catgirl. Maybe there's another story in there somewhere that Frank Miller will tell later on that she was inspired by Selina Kyle's costume. But Selina isn't even Catwoman during this time. But they are working together. And by the way, these issues are not inked by Klaus Janson. It is just Frank Miller with Lynn Varley now, and Todd Klein doing the lettering. So Lynn Varley no longer using the watercolors like she used in the first miniseries. Now she's experimenting with colors, digital colors, and you can see by the pixelations here, the digital pixelations, and honestly, the digital finishes in the book. So in this particular story, 3 years have passed, and Batman, the reason this is called Strikes Again is because he must rise out of obscurity. He has been in hiding, training Batman soldiers, Bat boys, and girls to stand up against villains. But now the villain turns out to be the government because the government is so corrupt. Batman decides to rescue other heroes because remember when I said that there are other heroes, but they're not really focused on. Like we saw a little bit of Green Arrow, we saw Superman, a couple of Easter eggs in the first one that you can find out for yourself. But in here, they go full blown superheroes. Like let's go and rescue these superheroes. So they go and rescue the Atom. He goes and rescues. By the way, the Bat Boys or the Sons of the Bat have their own costumes too, and they're sent on missions. And he goes and rescues the Flash, whose wife Iris has been kept captive and he's just been used to run as a generator. And it's a really interesting story as how he's building his own team of superheroes. Meanwhile, you see characters like Superman and Captain Marvel and Wonder Woman, and they're still working for the US government, while Batman is building an army to fight that government because he knows there's something there. When the president of the United States, not Ronald Reagan like in the first miniseries, is now a hologram, he knows that it's not just Lex Luthor involved, but also someone else. Perhaps some brainy character from outer space that is able to manipulate the superheroes like Superman, Wonder Woman, and Captain Marvel to side with him. Now, there's also a side story going on, or just couple of storylines that are happening in the background, and that is there is a character that is going around and murdering superheroes. So we see this character that can shapeshift, looks a lot like the Joker, and seems like he can't die. He's going around and killing these superheroes, or once known as superheroes, and you can find out exactly who he's killing and who exactly he is because there is a little bit of a plot twist that happens in the third book with the identity of this character. The other thing that's going on in these pages, we have an addition of these rock stars or musicians that are also politically outspoken characters that dress like superheroes that are thrown in here that are part of the talking heads of this particular future. And they kind of set a movement of their own against the government. Like they're speaking against the government and how we're just pretty much overpaid slaves and doing their own thing while Batman is still securing his team of superheroes that will help him stand up against what or who he thinks is evil. But like I said, there's other things that are building up around here. And this is the second issue, which takes us. And before I talk about the third issue, if you've ever wanted to see Superman and Wonder Woman get together, well, be prepared for about 6 pages of that happening and world shaking kind of getting together. And then we get to book 3 of The Dark Knight Strikes Again. This issue was delayed for about a year. So The Dark Knight Strikes Again started coming out in 2001, and this issue right here came out in 2002. Now, what Frank Miller did was take something from the real world, much like the mugging that he experienced, which led into The Dark Knight Returns. He took 9/11 and wrote it into the story. Of course, a little bit different, right? But you can see a lot of the inspiration for this, almost like written like a tribute. Now, he went on to do his own thing. He was going to do a follow up to this with Batman, but DC said, no, thank you. And that became Holy Terror. But that's how this particular issue starts. So you can tell that this was rewritten. And I don't know the way that he initially wanted to write the story, but it does have some twists and turns in here too, as to newcomers and legacy characters, if you will. And I don't have to tell you because I'm sure if you just look on the internet, you can find out for yourself that this particular story is really divisive. Whereas this one over here, is regarded as one of the greatest Batman stories. Not everybody, right? I've met people that don't like this either. It's not for everybody. But this right here, I've only met a handful of people that love this, including some of my viewers. So more power to you all. I just, whatever. If it makes you happy and you love it, that's all that matters. But I always suggest to people to read it for themselves and make up their own mind. Don't take it on someone else's word that something sucks or something is amazing, that you need to read it, that it's a must buy for your bookshelves, like some idiot that does a top 10 every month of books that are coming out. Hey, I do that list because you all asked. Anyway, what the hell was I saying? Yes, this story is very divisive. I'm sure most of you know, and there are reasons for that. A lot of it has to do with the art, because it's not Klaus Janson inking this. This is also not the art that was introduced in the Sin City, that chiaroscuro type of artwork. This is Frank Miller post 300 kind of doing this, his own thing. And of course, the colors here. Lynn Varley experimenting with these computer generated colors just kind of takes away from the realism and the grittiness of the original series. When I said that Gotham looks like a character, you're going to see a lot of panels here that really don't have much background. And don't get me wrong, there are some wonderful splash pages through here that are very iconic. Here, let me show you one in the third issue that I really like. It's brutal, but this one right here. But even the background, the colors aren't as gritty, right? Like they almost feel like cartoon colors. But I still like this. I think it's a wonderful spread page amongst all the brutality and disaster that's happened in the background. All right, we're going to look at the extras and welcome everybody back that did not want any spoilers. So we have the script right here of the original idea for The Dark Knight, the covers right here for The Dark Knight Returns 1, and The Dark Knight Triumphant issue 2, The Hunt for the Dark Knight issue 3, and then The Dark Knight Falls issue 4, and then the covers for DK2 or The Dark Knight Strikes Again. This is the Warner Books collection of The Dark Knight Returns over here. The chip kit designs of the hardcovers, which I had for years, that replaced my trade paperbacks. The statues, you're going to see a lot of sketches and a lot of toys and designs. And the script, big fan of that. Batman on a horse, 55-year-old Batman on a horse, hell yes. And early sketch for what will become The Dark Knight Strikes Again. I'd love to own just a sketch of that. That is one of my favorite Batman pages. It's the signed plate for the 10th anniversary edition. Some more designs and original pieces of art. And skipping just a little bit with some more sketches and character designs. And let's look at a little more. So looks like they're zooming in on some particular panels right here. That's Superman and Wonder Woman page. Dark Knight Returns. These are the acknowledgments for the people that inspired all of this. And The Dark Knight Strikes Again. Special thanks to all those wonderful folks. And then the bio on Frank Miller and Klaus Janson. And we saw the end sheets earlier. Let's look at the binding and then we'll do a comparison. 512 pages. There's that sewn binding. And it does have a bookmark ribbon. I love when they add these. Okay. Let's do a comparison to my second printing. Okay. We've got the second printing over here to the left. And the new printing to the right. The 2024 printing. And both of them sewn binding. Sorry. There we go. There's that Chip Kid designed right here. Credits looking the same. And of course this looking a little bit different because this is printed in 2024, whereas the second printing was printed in 2020. And this is something really interesting. The 2020 printing is saying that this is mixed paper from responsible sources, meaning it's probably got some recycled paper, whereas this one here comes from controlled area of trees. But 2020, 2024, introduction here by Frank Miller, the same. And the page count is the same. But I mainly wanted to do this to look at the way the book lays over and to see if there's a difference in the color. So we'll we will start with the Dark Knight Returns to look at the colors to see if there's a difference. And honestly, I'm not noticing anything. As far as the paper stock, maybe the 2020 printing is just a little bit thicker, not by much. And yeah, not by much, but the colors look the same. This one folds over a little bit better than the new printing, it looks like, but they both fold over about the same by the time you get to the middle. And and I don't mean gutter loss. Both of them come with a ribbon, by the way. I don't mean that there's gutter loss or anything. Actually, let's look at the way they lay over when there's a spread page. I just want to see if there's any kind of gutter loss, and really not much of one, if any, on either one. But I've had this book for a while now, and it lays over really well. This is a brand new book that I just flipped through because I've read these stories a couple times. Well, this Strikes Again I've only read twice, but I just kind of wanted to remember exactly what was going on through these pages, so I haven't properly read this one. But you can see here, yeah, about the same kind of gutter loss. Let's look in the back at the extras, and both of them, honestly, laying about the same with the same kind of gutter loss. But I want to be as thorough as I can be with these overviews. That, as they say, is that. If you're interested in purchasing this Absolute Edition, don't forget to check out our sponsors.
If you're in Europe and you're interested in buying these books, definitely check out Walt's Comic Shop in Berlin, Germany. They have the cheapest pre-order prices, flat shipping rate of €12 for all EU countries, emails answered within 24 hours, waltscomicshop.com, and you can use the code nearmintcondition at checkout and get free shipping for all EU countries with your first order over €40. That's Walt's Comic Shop, your reliable source for omnis and premium collected editions in Europe. Ding!
CheapGraphicNovels.com, your online home for graphic novels and collected editions up to 50% off cover price. They have excellent shipping and prompt and helpful service. Check out their bargain deals for up to 90% off cover price. And don't forget, the CGN also takes pre-orders. That way you don't miss out on the hottest releases. And they are currently running a special promotion for you Minties. If you're a first-time customer, after receiving your order confirmation email, reply back to that email and let them know Near Mint Condition sent you their way. They will then apply a free shipping promotional credit to your next order in the US. Cheap Graphic Novels, your source for the hottest books with the kind of deep discount, quality shipping, and customer service that will keep you coming back for more. And that was the content, the page count, and build, and of course the comparison to the second printing. Let me know in the comments down below if you are picking this up, if you already have the first or second printing, and of course what you think of the stories in here. Do you love Absolute Dark Knight Strikes Back? I have to call it Absolute because it is part of the Absolute editions now. The Dark Knight Strikes Back as much as you love The Dark Knight Returns. But if you have any questions, leave them down below. Don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe, and ring that bell for notifications. We are on Patreon and Spreadshop, amazing ways to support the channel. That's it, everybody. Stay healthy and safe out there. Much love.